Cook With Me. I'm Stella V. And if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. Leave me a comment telling me you subscribed and I will reply. I'm really happy to be sharing something very, very special with you today. And it is my mother's traditional stuffed eggplant. I learned how to cook from my mom. She's 93 years old. She's still cooking. She's still baking. She's a force to be reckoned with, and I was fortunate enough to grow up with all these recipes. Her stuffed eggplant has always been a family favorite. She's getting a little bit frail, so I'm very happy to be making a big batch of them today for her freezer. It's my way of helping her out a little bit and sharing with you this amazingly delicious recipe. The ingredients are few and simple, but together they create delicious dish, and I have served this to people who say they don't like eggplant, and I've converted many people. The ingredients you'll need to prepare this delicious dish are simple: grated Parmesan cheese, eggs, tomato sauce, salt, and olive oil. You can use any tomato sauce. I simply used crushed tomatoes. I sauté some celery in olive oil, add my tomatoes, and let that simmer with salt, a little bit of basil, and a little bit of Italian parsley. That will be the base for your stuffed eggplant. That tomato sauce will be what flavors your stuffed eggplant. Now I'll show you how to prepare the eggplant, and you simply cut the top off and slice it in half down vertically, so you end up with two halves. Using a small paring knife, we're going to cut into the eggplant and form a small rim around the outer edge. We are creating basically a boat shape. We'll be using all of the interior of the eggplant to create the stuffing. I like to put in small cuts across and vertically, and then simply scoop it out with a spoon. I was actually born in Italy, but I was a very young child when we emigrated to Canada. These recipes are from the province of Abruzzi in Italy, and our family comes from the Adriatic coast. It is right across from Rome, but on the other coast. The area in Italy is a lot of farmland, and I grew up with stories of the abundance of vegetables, produce, the variety, and the freshness, and that's just a little bit about some of my family history and my personal experiences. What you have left now, once you've taken all the filling out, are these beautiful boat-shaped containers, and the idea is to have about a 1/4 inch shell. You don't want it too thick a wall, but you don't want it too thin, and you don't want it to go through the outer lining of the eggplant. Since we'll be using the interior of the eggplant as the filling, we've got mostly nice small cubes because I had put those vertical and horizontal lines to scoop it out, but you can also, if there are any larger pieces, just give it a rough chop so that you end up with this nice small chopped filling. Now we'll just continue doing each of the eggplants in the same way, and the recipe, I'll show you how we'll add the ingredients proportionally. I'm doing a large batch of 6 eggplants right now, but you can do 3 or 4, which makes a good serving size for 3 or 4 or 6 people. Now I'm just continuing with each eggplant, putting in my vertical and horizontal, and I put the knife underneath as much as I can so that it just makes scooping them out that much easier. Spoon, I'm using a small teaspoon to scoop out any of the bottom sections that are still attached. And the aim always is to have about a 1/4 inch as the entire size of the wall. I've scooped out 2 eggplants, which actually is a nice serving for 4 people. That'll make a good serving size as a first course or even as a main or a side dish. Okay. Our next step now is to rinse them in salt water. I'm putting these in a bowl and I will add some salt to it and some cold water. Rinsing them in cold salted water will eliminate any bitterness that might be in the eggplant itself. I've already added the water. Now I'm going to put in a couple of teaspoons of salt. And now I'm doing the same with the shells. I've covered them with cold water and again adding a couple of teaspoons of salt. Now I'm just going to let that hang out for about 10 minutes and you'll start to see that the water turns a kind of grayish color. While the eggplant is hanging out in that salted water bath, this is a good time to saute your tomatoes. Now, usually I do take a traditional recipe and turn it into an Instant Pot recipe, but this recipe is so special to our hearts that I really wanted to keep it as my mother makes it. So I'm just going to go and simmer my tomatoes and have the sauce ready for when the eggplant is ready. I have some chopped celery diced into pretty small pieces in a couple of tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm just sauteing them and cooking them down before I add my tomatoes. This is a really simple tomato-based sauce. You don't want a lot of different flavors competing with that wonderful eggplant mixture that we're going to stuff the eggplant with. We'll just give the celery a few minutes to soften up. While the celery is sauteing, I'm actually going to change the water in the eggplant mixture. I'm now going to add my tomatoes. I have a full tin of crushed tomatoes, and I've added my tomatoes and I've lowered the heat to a simmer. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt and some basil. I don't have fresh basil, but a little teaspoon of pureed basil will work just fine. I added a couple of tablespoons of olive oil to saute the celery, but now I'm going to add a couple more tablespoons, and that's going to flavor the tomato sauce. I wanted you to have a look at that sauce because it may look like there's an awful lot of olive oil in there, but that's what's going to flavor the tomato sauce beautifully. We're now ready to squeeze all that moisture out of the diced eggplant, and I discovered a wonderful way of doing it. We used to squeeze it out into towels and try and get it as dry as possible, but using a handy salad spinner makes the job so easy. And there we have it inside the salad spinner. Works perfectly well and makes it so easy. We want that cubed eggplant to be as dry as possible. So now we have perfectly dry eggplant. There's a lot of moisture in the bottom of that salad spinner, and we'll just put the diced eggplant into a bowl, and we're ready now to add the other components to the stuffing. Now we're going to add the other components to the stuffing, and we'll crack in 3 eggs. And about 3 or 4 tablespoons of Parmigiano Reggiano grated. Give that a nice mix and make sure all of that's blended together. This makes a really good vegetarian main dish because of all that protein from the eggs and the cheese. Now I've taken the shells out of the liquid and we'll give them a little spin as well to get some of the moisture out. And a lot of the liquid is in the bottom of the salad spinner, as you can see. And we're going to give them just a little bit of a pat dry with a clean tea towel. We really want to get that moisture out because eggplant itself contains a lot of water, and if we don't, we want to make sure to get them as dry as possible because eggplant does contain a lot of water naturally, and we don't want to add any extra. Our sauce has been simmering for about 10 or 15 minutes, and it smells delicious. It smells delicious. That extra olive oil really does a lot to flavor it, and the celery has added just a beautiful touch to it. Our tomato sauce has been simmering, and again, a very simple sauce: tomatoes, olive oil, a little bit of celery, and some basil. And now we're ready to assemble. I'm adding the tomato sauce to the chopped diced eggplant. Now, how much you add is a matter of personal preference. I like a lot more, but you can have it lightly tomatoey. And now we're ready for the final assembly, and I like to use these aluminum foil containers. They make cleaning up fabulously easy and very handy to use to bake our eggplant in. I've added a couple of ladles of the tomato sauce mixture to the bottom of that tinfoil pan, and I'm going to add another couple of tablespoons of olive oil to the bottom as well. And now we simply lay our perfect little boats inside the pan, and they can be touching, overlapping, it really doesn't matter. They will shrink somewhat in the baking process. And now it's simply a matter of filling our boats up. And you see now why it's so important to have them intact without having gone through the shell of it. May look like a lot of filling, but you want them pretty well overly stuffed. There will be some shrinkage during the cooking process. And now we'll just ladle a little bit more of that tomato sauce all over. And I like to sprinkle some more Parmigiano Reggiano all over the top of them. And now they're ready to be covered with foil. I've preset my oven to 400 degrees, and it'll take about an hour for them to completely cook. So I'm sealing them completely, and as I said, it'll take about an hour, but you'll start to see how they'll be, and you'll see when they're all caramelized and oozing with goodness. After about an hour, take the foil off and let it stay in the oven for about another 10 or 15 minutes. And now the hour's passed, they've come out of the oven, and our stuffed eggplant look absolutely delicious. They smell even better, and I really think they're going to get Mom's seal of approval. You can serve them right away, of course, or in this case, I'm going to package them all up individually for my mom, and they'll keep in the freezer wonderfully for 4 to 6 months. I hope you've enjoyed this session, a traditional dish that's easy to prepare following our simple steps. If you like what you see, please hit subscribe. Leave me a comment telling me you subscribed, and I will respond to you. I'm Stella V, and come cook with me.